Title: Beneath the Quiet Lies. Chapter 1: The Slow Fade. It wasn't any one moment that set him on edge. It was the gradual shift, the way Elise no longer looked him in the eye when she said goodnight, or how her laughter had turned hollow. She used to dance while cooking, used to hum the same 3 off-key notes to their wedding song when she washed dishes. Now, the house was filled with silence. The first crack appeared on a Thursday night. Daniel came home late from a meeting and found Elise in the kitchen, startled. She quickly shut her laptop. She smiled, a forced twitch at the corners of her mouth. "Just looking at vacation spots," she said. He nodded. But when he checked the browser history the next morning, a habit he'd never had before but suddenly felt compelled to do, there was no trace of Expedia or Airbnb. Just an incognito tab. That was the first lie. Weeks passed. Elise began going to the gym, something she'd never cared for before. She wore new perfume, something more sultry than her usual. Chapter 2: Echoes in the Mirror. Daniel stood in front of the mirror, razor in hand, half-shaved and lost in thought. The hum of the bathroom light filled the silence. He stared at himself, searching his reflection for answers. Had he changed? Had something in him shifted enough to cause this quiet unraveling? He remembered the way Elise used to run her fingers through his hair when he leaned over the sink. Now, she barely touched him at all. Conversations had become transactions. Did you pay the gas bill? Don't forget the groceries. Can you pick up the dry cleaning? Nothing that scraped the surface. Nothing that required intimacy. One Saturday, Daniel offered to drive her to the gym. Elise declined, too quickly. "I like walking there," she said, tying her sneakers without looking at him. Her leggings clung tighter than usual. Her makeup was subtle but deliberate. "I'll be back in a couple hours." He followed her once. Not out of jealousy. Not at first. It was confusion, bewilderment wrapped in guilt. He drove 10 minutes behind her, careful not to get too close. Watched as she took a left where the gym was straight. Then another left. She parked in front of a house he didn't recognize and didn't get out right away. She checked her phone. Smiled. The door opened. A man stepped out. Tall. Athletic. They hugged, too close, too long. Elise leaned into him like she used to lean into Daniel after dinner, when they'd watch old movies in their pajamas. Daniel drove away before they kissed. He didn't need to see it. The ache in his chest told him enough. Back home, he sat on the edge of their bed, her pillow still faint with that new perfume. The scent stung his nose now, cloying, sweet, dishonest. He stared at the ring on his finger, twisting it slowly. 12 years. Vacations. Laughs. Fights. The miscarriage. Late-night talks about baby names and growing old. Where had all of that gone? Had she buried it? Had he? Elise came home an hour later than she said she would, glowing with a softness he hadn't seen in months. She kissed him on the cheek. "You okay?" she asked, breezing past him into the bathroom. He watched the door close. The click of the lock sounded like a nail being hammered in. "No," he said to no one. "I'm not." Chapter 3: The Second Phone. The following week passed like molasses, thick, slow, impossible to ignore. Daniel moved through it on autopilot. Meetings at work blurred together. He laughed at a joke he didn't hear and missed an important email from a client he should have called back 2 days ago. At night, he lay awake, watching Elise sleep with her back to him, her breathing steady, indifferent. He wanted to ask her, "Who is he?" But the words curled up in his throat like old paper, dry and flammable. He feared what would burn if he said them out loud. Instead, he searched for pieces. On Thursday, Elise left her phone on the nightstand while she showered, an unusual lapse. He didn't mean to go for it. His fingers moved before he could think. It was locked. Of course it was. But it was the second phone, the one he didn't recognize, that made his pulse spike. A black case. No smudges. Newer than hers. Tucked beneath a scarf in the bottom drawer of the nightstand. Hidden, but not well. He held it in his palm like it might explode. And in a way, it already had. Back in college, Daniel had studied engineering. He knew how systems worked, how structure and logic made things predictable. But here was chaos. Here was Elise, the woman he loved, the woman who once sobbed in his arms when her mother died, keeping a secret life in a drawer. He powered it on. No password. A mistake. Or maybe she hadn't expected him to look. Maybe she didn't think he'd need to. The messages were all there. Alex. I can still smell you on my sheets. Saturday can't come soon enough. He doesn't deserve you. You know that, right? Elise. You make me feel alive again. I hate lying, but I can't leave, not yet. He wouldn't understand. Daniel sat down slowly, the phone still glowing in his hand. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. His stomach turned, heavy with the truth. He hadn't just imagined it. This wasn't some insecurity or midlife doubt. It was real. The betrayal was alive, humming between each line of their text history like electricity. The shower turned off. The bathroom door clicked. He had 10 seconds to decide what kind of man he would be. Confront her? Pretend he didn't know, just a little longer? Wait, plan, gather more? Daniel shoved the phone back in its place and closed the drawer just as Elise stepped out in a towel, humming faintly, 3 off-key notes of their wedding song. The sound made his chest cave in. Morning, she said, smiling like she used to, like she could, as if nothing had cracked beneath their feet. Daniel smiled back. Morning. Chapter 4, Fractures in the Frame. Daniel found himself standing in the middle of the living room late one night, staring at the photographs on the wall. 12 years of memories, frozen in frames, the honeymoon in Santorini, Elise laughing on a beach in a floppy straw hat, the anniversary trip to Napa, cheeks pink with wine and sunlight, a blurry selfie taken after their first home-cooked meal in the new house, sauce on both their shirts. He ran his fingers over the glass of one frame, as if the texture of a happier time could bring him back into it. But all he felt was the smooth, cold lie of permanence. For days, he became a man split in two. There was the Daniel Elise saw, the man who still brought home her favorite wine on Fridays, who listened when she vented about work, who kissed her forehead while his stomach curdled. He played the part of the devoted husband with such skill it frightened him. And then there was the Daniel who counted her gym days. Who noted when she got text messages and when she didn't. Who memorized Alex's number and traced it back to a work contact she'd mentioned once, casually, at a dinner party 2 years ago. He worked in architecture. So did she. That's how they'd met. The pieces kept falling into place, jagged and cruel. One evening, Daniel lingered in her car after she went inside with groceries. He rifled through the glove box, under the seats, in the side pocket of the door. That's where he found it. A motel key. Room 214. Briarwood Inn. 20 minutes from home. He looked it up. Dingy. Anonymous. The kind of place you chose when shame was heavier than curiosity. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, mind churning. The truth was no longer a distant storm. It was a flood at his feet. The next morning, Elise left for the gym again. Daniel waited exactly 15 minutes. Then he got in his car and followed the familiar turns. Left. Left. A pause at the corner. Her car, parked near the alley. He passed her. kept going. His hands were shaking. But he didn't stop this time. Not yet. He drove in silence until the highway swallowed him. The world blurred by his windows, and still, all he could think about was room 214. By the time he pulled over at a rest stop an hour later, his knuckles were white on the wheel. He exhaled the breath he didn't know he was holding and stared at his reflection in the rearview mirror. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just looked. Like a man trying to recognize himself again. Then he pulled out his phone and opened a new note. At the top, he typed one word. Exit. And beneath it, a list began. Lawyer. Copy of marriage certificate. Bank account logins. One trusted friend. Each keystroke was a crack in the shell. Not in his marriage, that had already shattered. This list was for something else. This was the beginning of escape. Chapter 5, Ghosts and Grounds. Daniel's coffee tasted different now. Bitter. Even when he added sugar, the aftertaste lingered, sharp, metallic, like guilt left too long in the air. He stood by the kitchen counter, staring through the window at the backyard where the wind moved the trees, but nothing else did. Stillness had become a kind of ache. Elise came downstairs later that morning, radiant in a way he used to adore. She wore a loose sweater over fitted jeans, her hair swept up casually. Daniel noticed how she always dressed like she might run into someone important now. She kissed his cheek. It was automatic. Meaningless. I've got a client meeting across town. Might be late, she said, not looking up from her phone. He nodded. Be careful. The door closed softly behind her, and Daniel stood in the silence, clutching his mug like a shield. He didn't check the second phone today. He didn't need to. He'd memorized enough. Instead, he called someone he hadn't spoken to in a long time. Hey, it's me, Daniel said when the call connected. I need a favor. And I need you to not ask why. Caleb, his college roommate and oldest friend, didn't hesitate. Say the word. By noon, Daniel was sitting across from a lawyer named Meredith Grant, whose office was filled with books and the faint scent of lavender and aged paper. Her gaze was clear and steady, the kind that saw through politeness and bullshit. I haven't filed yet, Daniel said, hands gripping the armrests. But I'm preparing. Quietly. Meredith nodded. Are there children involved? No. Joint accounts? Yes. Infidelity? The pause stretched like wire. Yes. He showed her screenshots. The text messages. The motel key photo. Her expression didn't change, professional, practiced, but Daniel caught the flicker of pity behind her eyes. We can work with this, she said. But if you want to protect yourself, now's the time to move carefully. He nodded. I already started a list. Meredith gave a small smile. Good. Lists keep us sane when everything else breaks loose. When Daniel got home that evening, Elise was already in the kitchen, phone tucked between shoulder and cheek, laughing softly, an unfamiliar sound now. She hung up quickly when she saw him. Something flickered in her face, then disappeared. Hey, she said, almost sheepish. I thought I'd cook tonight. You've seemed off. He studied her for a moment. His mind was a battlefield, rage and restraint circling each other, neither winning. But he said only, thanks. I'd like that. Dinner was quiet. She made pasta. Garlic and wine filled the air like an old memory. For a moment, it felt almost normal. But Daniel knew now, normal was just a costume. A disguise for the things people didn't want to admit. Later, when she was in bed scrolling through her phone, Daniel stepped outside and sat on the porch. The sky was clear, stars freckled across the dark like tiny cracks of light. He pulled out his phone and opened the note again. Exit. He added another line. Safety deposit box. Daniel closed his eyes and listened to the wind. It no longer sounded like silence. It sounded like change. Chapter 6, The Paper Trail. On Monday, Daniel left work early. He told his assistant he had a doctor's appointment, though the only thing ailed in him now was certainty. It had hardened inside him like stone, quiet, cold, immovable. The safety deposit box was at a credit union Elise didn't know he had an account with. He hadn't used it in years, not since his father died and left behind a handful of old war bonds and a pocket watch that hadn't ticked in decades. It felt strange, walking through those glass doors, holding pieces of a different life in his mind and building a bunker for the one that was falling apart. He deposited a copy of their marriage certificate, printouts of the text messages, photos of the motel key, and statements from their joint bank account. Each one marked, dated, and arranged in folders. The lawyer had been clear: protect yourself now, not later. Trust in marriage had failed. Documentation wouldn't. The clerk didn't ask what was in the folders. She smiled politely, handed him the key, and told him to have a nice day. He almost laughed at the absurdity of it. On the drive home, he passed a florist and turned in on impulse. The same woman who had made Elisa's bouquet 12 years ago still worked behind the counter. Her hair was whiter now, her eyes softer with age. Anniversary, she asked, tying ribbon around a bundle of deep red tulips. Something like that, he said. Elise didn't question the flowers when he handed them to her that evening. She smiled, surprised. They're beautiful. What's the occasion? Daniel kissed her temple. You've been working hard. I thought you deserved something nice. A flicker of guilt crossed her face. It was gone as quickly as it came. She placed the flowers in a vase near the window, humming again, those same 3 off-key notes. Later that night, Daniel sat in the guest room, pretending to read. He could hear Elise on the phone through the wall. Her voice was soft, muffled, but unmistakably tender. She wasn't talking to her sister. Or her mother. A full minute passed after she hung up before he moved. He walked to the dresser, opened the top drawer, and removed the second phone again. This time, he didn't check the texts. He opened the call log. Alex, 27 minutes. He placed the phone back and stared at it for a long time. It lay there like a gun with the safety off. The next morning, Daniel didn't go for his run. He sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold, a legal pad in front of him. He wrote. Things I know now. Love does not protect against betrayal. Silence is not the absence of pain, it's the camouflage of it. You can sleep beside someone and still be completely alone. Leaving is not weakness. Sometimes, it's the last strength you have. He tore out the page and folded it into his wallet. Later that week, Caleb texted him. You still want the storage unit? Keys are yours. Months on me. Daniel replied. Yeah. Thanks. Almost ready. Elise had no idea her husband was building a shadow version of himself. One that wasn't tethered to her anymore. He watched her move through the house like nothing had changed. But Daniel had changed. And soon, everything else would too. Chapter 7, Quiet Inventory. The storage unit sat at the edge of town, tucked behind a row of chain-link fencing and forgotten warehouses. Daniel parked beside Unit 312, the keys Caleb had given him cool in his palm. He stood there for a moment, the silence pressing in. No birds, no traffic, just the sound of gravel shifting beneath his feet. He opened the door. The metal rolled upward with a shuddering groan. Inside, the unit was empty. Cold. A box of possibilities. He had brought 4 things in the trunk of his car, a duffel bag with clothes, an old laptop, a small fireproof safe, and a framed photograph of his parents. They went in first, one by one, like offerings to a future he hadn't entirely imagined yet. Then he sat on the floor, back against the metal wall, and tried to breathe. There was no catharsis. No dramatic flood of emotion. Just a strange numbness, like watching yourself from somewhere slightly above and behind. This wasn't escape. Not yet. This was preparation. A kind of controlled disappearance. He stayed there for an hour. He didn't check his phone. Didn't think about what Elise was doing or who she might be texting. That silence, that absence of curiosity, told him something deeper. He was detaching. Slowly. Deliberately. Layer by layer. That night, Elise mentioned a conference. In Chicago, she said, over a glass of wine. 3 days. Maybe 4 if we do the site visit. Daniel nodded, neutral. When? Next week. Thursday morning flight. He held her gaze longer than usual. She didn't blink. I'll make sure the house is taken care of, he said. She smiled. Thank you. They didn't speak about it again. But Daniel wrote it down. Conference, Thursday Sunday. He also wrote, watch her pack. And, check billing history, hotel? Flights? The next day, Daniel met Caleb at a coffee shop on the far side of town, neutral territory. You look like shit, Caleb said, sliding a black coffee across the table. I feel worse. You still sure about this? Daniel nodded. I'm past questions. They went over logistics, storage, legal progress, finances. Caleb had helped set up a new bank account under a trust name. Daniel transferred what he could without drawing suspicion. It wasn't about hiding money. It was about drawing lines. Quiet, invisible ones. You tell her anything yet? No. I will. Just, not yet. You waiting for her to come clean? No. I'm waiting for her to dig the hole deep enough that she can't climb out. Caleb winced. Jesus. I want her to understand what she broke. Later that evening, Elise came into the living room wearing the cardigan Daniel had bought her 3 anniversaries ago. She curled up beside him on the couch, almost reflexively, and asked, do you ever think about taking a trip? Just the 2 of us? Daniel turned his head slowly. Lately? Yeah. I don't know. Things feel off. Maybe we've both been tired. Distracted. It was the closest she'd come to admitting anything. Maybe, he said. She reached out, took his hand, and squeezed it gently. We're okay, right? Daniel forced a smile. Of course. And in that moment, he realized, she still believed he didn't know. The lie was intact. But now, so was he. When Elise went to bed early, Daniel stayed downstairs and stared at the fireplace. He didn't cry. He didn't rage. He simply opened the legal pad again and added to the list. Wait for Chicago. Collect passwords. One final meeting with Meredith. Say goodbye on your terms. Then he flipped to a blank page and wrote 2 words at the top. The day after. And beneath them, he began to imagine what life might look like. Chapter 8, The Day After. Thursday came cold and gray. A pale drizzle traced lines down the windows, and the house felt like a held breath. Elise rolled her suitcase to the front door, dressed in the black coat she wore when she wanted to look serious but effortless. Her heels clicked like punctuation across the hardwood floor. Daniel stood in the doorway, coffee in hand, still in his sweats. You sure you don't need a ride? He asked. She shook her head. Alex, she stopped. A colleague's picking me up. We're splitting the rental from the airport. Daniel nodded. Have a good trip. She hesitated, then leaned in to kiss his cheek. It was soft, practiced. Meaningless. "Love you," she said, grabbing the handle of her suitcase. He smiled gently. "Safe travels." He didn't say it back. The door shut behind her, and Daniel stood there listening, to the silence, to the absence. It wasn't a vacuum anymore. It was space. Space to move. Space to breathe. Upstairs, in the master bedroom, he went through the checklist with slow precision. The laptop, wiped. The copy of the exit file, gone from the drawer. The second phone, reset and smashed, its pieces placed in separate trash bags. One in the kitchen. One in the garage. He showered. Shaved. Put on the shirt he hadn't worn in months, the one that still faintly smelled like cedar and confidence. By noon, he was in Meredith Grant's office again, final documents signed and timestamped. The petition for divorce would be filed that day, couriered to Elisa's office. Certified. Irrefutable. "You okay?" Meredith asked, glancing up from the paperwork. Daniel folded his hands. "Getting there. Wait for Chicago. Collect passwords. One final meeting with Meredith. Say goodbye on your terms." Then he flipped to a blank page and wrote 2 words at the top. "The day after." And beneath them, he began to imagine what life might look like. Chapter 8, The Day After. Thursday came cold and gray. A pale drizzle traced lines down the windows, and the house felt like a held breath. Elise rolled her suitcase to the front door, dressed in the black coat she wore when she wanted to look serious but effortless. Her heels clicked like punctuation across the hardwood floor. Daniel stood in the doorway, coffee in hand, still in his sweats. "You sure you don't need a ride?" he asked. She shook her head. "Alex," she stopped. "A colleague's picking me up. We're splitting the rental from the airport." Daniel nodded. "Have a good trip." She hesitated, then leaned in to kiss his cheek. It was soft, practiced. Meaningless. "Love you," she said, grabbing the handle of her suitcase. He smiled gently. "Safe travels." He didn't say it back. The door shut behind her, and Daniel stood there listening, to the silence, to the absence. It wasn't a vacuum anymore. It was space. Space to move. Space to breathe. Upstairs, in the master bedroom, he went through the checklist with slow precision. The laptop, wiped. The copy of the exit file, gone from the drawer. The second phone, reset and smashed, its pieces placed in separate trash bags. One in the kitchen. One in the garage. He showered. Shaved. Put on the shirt he hadn't worn in months, the one that still faintly smelled like cedar and confidence. By noon, he was in Meredith Grant's office again, final documents signed and timestamped. The petition for divorce would be filed that day, couriered to Elisa's office. Certified. Irrefutable. "You okay?" Meredith asked, glancing up from the paperwork. Daniel folded his hands. "Getting there.